Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Minha and welcome to the Mindful Muslim podcast at Inspirited Minds, where we discuss Islam, psychology, spirituality and mental health. Today I was joined by Suhayl Patel, who came all the way from Preston to talk about his gambling addiction, and it was super interesting, mashallah. There was so much raw content and emotion and it was amazing. I was really moved by it. It was super inspirational. So please do carry on listening. We also want to know how we're doing, what you guys think of us, what we could do better. So please leave a review. Please continue sharing with your friends and your family. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, wherever you're listening to us on. Please do leave a good review. Also, we need your funds, so please do inshallah visit us on Patreon and even give us a little bit if you can. We are 100% donation policy charity, and we are led by volunteers. So inshallah, please do keep listening. I pray you guys find it beneficial. Assalamu alaikum. So assalamu alaikum Suhayl, jazakallah khair for coming all the way from Preston to join us. Really appreciate it. So if you could tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and what you hope to discuss today, that would be great.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's a pleasure to be here and talk about a topic which I'm very passionate about. So my background is in teaching, so I'm a English teacher, and at the same time I completed my Islamic studies, so I'm a Hafiz of the Quran, and my passion is addiction, and I have some experience of addiction. Therefore, I'd like to share my story, and at the same time maybe inspire somebody out there, who's struggling as I was struggling a while ago. So I think it's a very important topic to discuss, which doesn't have enough airtime, to be honest.
Yeah. For sure. So one thing about this podcast is we like to get very personal. So I'm going to ask a couple of personal questions. So out of curiosity, personally, when you said English teacher, and this is probably like a lot of stereotypes that a lot of people have. So when you said English teacher and then you said addiction, I was a bit like, okay, how does that work? So did one come before the other, or is it all intertwined?
It was all intertwined.
Okay.
It was a mix of everything. Initially, I was a religious education teacher in an Islamic school. So my kind of upbringing in terms of my youth was spent very much in missionary work, da'wah, and trying to almost spend my time upon myself spiritually, and also going for retreats, etc. So then I made a conscious decision to kind of work in an Islamic environment to kind of disseminate and offer my services and also benefit myself by being in that positive environment. However, that kind of worked, I felt, against me, because there were a lot of unresolved issues, let's just say. So I enjoyed teaching in English, I still do. However, I think I've reached a moment or period in my life where I feel mental health, addiction, just general advocacy for the Muslim community or within the Muslim community takes precedence over teaching personally. That's what I feel.
I'm just trying to digest that, because I think usually when we hear stories like this, and it's so great, mashallah, that you're talking about it. I think when we usually hear stories about this, you usually hear somebody that was not on the deen, and then they had these addictions and etc., and then they came on the deen. But for you, it was sort of like reversed, and I think that happens, but it's very like underground in our community, and I think a lot of people just refuse to accept that actually exists. And I think it's so great that you're kind of defeating like the stereotype that people who people who are practicing they can't fall off deen, or they can't go, and at the end of the day we're still humans, right?
And that's exactly my motivation, to be honest, because up until a year ago I was still thinking, how could this have happened to me? How could I may be just a bad Muslim, or I'm just not a good enough person, Muslim aside, not a good enough human being. So all these questions were running through my mind, and I felt I think there must be more individuals coming from the circles which I came from. So my friends many would be ulama. Some, the environment, I was working in a very orthodox Islamic school, so everything was there, however, something was missing, and maybe I'll talk about that as well. And I think it's important to recognize that despite, no matter where you are in terms of your faith, you are still living where we are living in Europe, in an environment where there's so many temptation, and addiction doesn't take place in a vacuum, and we've got to recognize that the environment, the societal factors, many things that influence us, and I think we're still in denial about it, and I've done a lot of soul searching in that process as well.
So picking up on the point about what you said about the environment that we're in and etc., a lot of people would argue that by bringing you up in such a strict Islamic education and an orthodox environment, you wouldn't have been in that environment. So I mean, I want to, before we go on to how it all started for you, I just want to sort of get your opinion on what is missing in these Islamic institutions. How does this occur? Is it because there's not enough education? Is it because that is so strict and it's so like Islamic institutes are so military that there's not enough space for children to be children and youth to be youth? Like, what's missing?
Well, my upbringing in itself, so my household at that time wasn't very Dini at all or Islamic at all. In fact, I was, you could say, along with another family member, I was the only one who was seen to be practicing. So when I became a Hafiz, it was purely by, I just put my hand up to say, okay, I'd like to do this. It was an opportunity. So even whilst completing the Hifz, it was relatively a soul journey. So, I spent it, in isolation. I did my Hifz with my teacher, etc. So in terms of my upbringing, I was very much exuberant, very enthusiastic about it. However, when I did engage in those activities in Da'wah, Tabligh, Jamaat, or activities as such, working in Islamic environment, I felt I had to be somebody, and I couldn't be myself, the true self, and I forgot myself, that individual within that. So amongst the rituals, amongst the in a respectful way, the dogma, I kind of forgot who Suhayl actually was. And then you're consistently asked to look up to those individuals in the community who are actually maybe better spiritually in that respect. So you're constantly judging yourself and taking account whether, okay, where am I in this? And I felt a hypocrite, and I was told I was a hypocrite as well. That was the worst thing, where when individuals did see those flaws within me, whether it would be salah or something else, then they would judge, very quick to judge. And this kind of along the way, I kind of fell off the kind of wagon due to this kind of constant breaking down of self-esteem and confidence. And it definitely is, there is a lack of safe space for individuals to be individuals, to be themselves, children to be children, because a 14-year-old, has to be a 14-year-old, and they will have these temptation desires, but they've got to let them out in a healthy way. And working in an orthodox Islamic school, I as a teacher felt somewhat internally repressed. I felt I had to be somebody that I truly wasn't, because initially when I did kind of start my journey on the deen, it was a very much for my own self. I was very enthusiastic as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old child in high school. However, I quickly lost that in a couple of years, and that was troublesome, And
is that because that passion wasn't nurtured? in the correct environment.
And that passion wasn't nurtured, but I was escaping from something. So what I did feel throughout my journey was that nurture which you do receive at home, that there was a hole, there was a gap somewhere in terms of love. So I found a love through the brothers in the Tabligh Jamaat. So there was a sense of belonging there. So what I saw, the religious Dini fervor and passion, that resonated with me. However, there wasn't that space to actually talk about my home issues with the family. For example, I had another brother who was struggling, so I couldn't really speak about these issues, or wasn't the space there. I was a very shy teenager, so that didn't really help at all. But there was a lack of opportunity, I would say, and a lack of confidence within myself to actually talk about what was deeply concerning to me, and the emphasis is more on going out, so going in khuruj, or spending time in da'wah, on retreats, or praying, so rather than spiritual, rather than refining the inner self, and that's, I think, and I did try to search for that, that spiritual side. When I did recognize that this is missing within me, I need something more, because I'm still going home and doing the same thing, despite being in these activities or these circles. So there was a crisis there, but it wasn't arrested. I just kind of kept going, trying to find myself, maybe hoping I will bump into that person or that activity, or I will find something.
So
which
you weren't
will
really
feel
self-sufficient. You were dependent on other people and the things that you were doing. And subhanAllah, what comes to mind is how holistic like Islam and the Sharia is, because it's not just about giving dawah. You have to work on yourself, and of course you like definition of that. So I guess I'm wondering if possibly you could sort of tell us where it all started. I mean, you've mentioned that you started practicing at 12, 13, and then you slowly kind of lost that passion and lost the way. So where did it all start? Where did the addiction begin? How did it come about?
So it's sometimes difficult to find the defining moment where I feel it. But however, one of the they talk about in addiction, possibly a factor for addiction is intergenerational transmission, where somebody in the family has engaged in such behavior. So one of my family members did, and he was actually a person who used to go read 5 daily prayers as well. So very similar, I saw those patterns. So he did, and he used to vacate the Ladbrokes in Preston, and I used to find pens in the house, and I was very young then. I didn't really think of much of it. However, when I did get married, initially I had an issue with regards to some insurance which I'd bought, and I'd thought it was 0% balance transfer, whereas it was only on retail purchases. So what I did, instantly I was in this crisis. What do I do? And again, not able to speak to anybody about that error which I made in terms of not reading the small print. So which
is such a human mistake.
So feeling very guilty and thinking, okay, I'm in a hole here, I'm in a situation, and it was not much, the deficit wasn't great. However, I opened a betting account online, and the first account which I opened was a Ladbrokes account. And firstly, I just want to say, before I kind of go in, that before I was quite reluctant to speak about my kind of gambling history, but recently I did a talk in a masjid, and before I did the talk, the alim, the Maulana, the Sheikh, who I knew for many years, he saw me I sent him an email to say that this is what's happened to me. I'd like you to help me kind of promote and raise awareness about the harm. So he was inspired, and he said, well, there is a hadith which mentions that the one who repents is like the one who hasn't committed the sin at all. So I feel that that gave me the courage to speak about it, because I have truly kind of repented or remorseful about it. Allah accept. Now, So when I did open the account, the first was the Ladbrokes account, which my family member used to go to. And one of the very first kind of bets which I placed was a large amount of money. And purely down to a lack of understanding how it works. I didn't know how it all worked at all. And I did experience a big win initially. I did win some money, and I felt so guilty about winning it because I knew the funds were haram for me. I couldn't spend them, I couldn't do anything. So I donated it to charity, online to Barnardo's, I think it was. So there was that guilt there, and I quickly got over the guilt, and however I did experience a buzz or some sort of
adrenaline.
And some sort of elation, euphoria. It was definitely there because of something that was done in secret. Nobody knew about it, and I did win. So all these factors, kind of contributed to going back to it again, kind of recreating that. And growing up, I was quite bored in terms of in the weekends or evenings, didn't really have that kind of fulfilling social circle, even generally family time as well. That was something which was missing. So I stopped gambling for a long time after that, after potentially placing a couple of bets. I kind of gave it up. When I got married, my marriage wasn't working out as well. Because I was working where I was working, I was experiencing some financial issue, or I felt a certain expectation to earn to certain amount. So I kind of resorted to gambling again.
Do you feel like your expectations to win, like earn a certain amount, was due to this? Like, was that ever explicitly said to you, or was it due to the stereotypes that men have in Asian communities?
It was said to me, because I left a very good job to go and work where I did. So as a result, there was that expectation. I did feel very unfulfilled. I felt I'm not good enough, and this is something which actually dented and destroyed my self-confidence and self-esteem. Was being told that you're actually, even sometimes not directly, indirectly being told, and at times directly, that you're actually not good enough, and that really hurt me at all. Definitely hurt me, and that was a result why I actually did what I did. I felt just to feel better within myself, or what I experienced, a sense of, that euphoria, etc., which was missing, that love. Because as a person, I felt I was very loyal and very giving individual. And I'd made a conscious choice to work in that sort of environment. And it was something that was decided in tandem with my then partner, my wife. And the marriage was such that I was leading a secret life by keeping this gambling hidden. So I would go into it, come out of it, and fluctuate kind of, and feeling very bad. And as feeling bad is the worst thing, because then a person repents, then he gets over it and moves on positively. However, after repenting, I was feeling even more, comparing myself to other individuals and thinking, well, they're not engaging in that kind of behavior. There must be something inherently wrong with you as a person for you to do this. As a teacher, I also taught, I also had a class of boys who were completing the Quran to memory. So it added a bit of more pressure, being where I was. I couldn't seem to be doing what I was doing, but it was all online. So hence, it never came out until it was very, very late. And my partner didn't find out until it was basically a month before I got divorced, and it was not the only reason, but it did contribute to it massively in that sense. Yeah.
So what are your... Because, I mean, for me, someone who, the only addiction I have is probably cat videos. But for somebody that hasn't ever experienced addiction, I would be interested to know what it is. Like, what is that? Because obviously you can read as many psychological theories as you want, and you can read science and, the whole immediate gratification and, things like the idea of what if I win, and that's what keeps you going. But what does it feel like in that moment? What is it like? And when you lose, what's it like? And when you win, what is it like?
It's a roller coaster of emotion, and it's something which is very difficult for, I think the brain struggles to cope with that amount flood of activity. So when you're in the moment, then you feel totally on top of the world, I guess. When you have that money to spend, then I will fantasize about doing something with that money, you know, maybe. And a lot of the intentions which I had, and which seems very distorted, and seems the way which I think about it is that some of the money I would think, okay, I'll do something good with this. Maybe I'll buy some educational resources to help my students, even though
so it was sincere. Underneath it all, it was still sincere.
I was making excuses for it, yes, definitely, because I wanted to be in a better position financially as well. So but in that moment I was thinking these things, and I was explaining to some people recently as well that the effect of gambling is the same as drugs and alcohol. I've never taken drugs or alcohol. However, from what I read and from what I see in individuals, it numbs the pain. It definitely numbs the pain. And even though I would be...
It's a distraction, right? It sounds
it's
like
a huge,
you used it as a distraction.
a huge escape. From online, my gambling transcended into in-shop betting. So I used to go into betting shop dressed like this. The first time ever I went into a betting shop, before I went in, I paced up and down the street for about 20 minutes thinking, oh, I hope somebody doesn't see me, or you know, what am I doing? Or I was trepidation there, and eventually I went in, and I kept going to that same particular shop, and it was an escapism over there. I could forget about my troubles, my debts, or fallings out, or whatever issue I had at that time, or was running away from. I could forget about it. I could spend hours in that shop, literally betting on one race to another race to another race to another race, and I became fascinated by horses. I developed a very liking for them, and I used to study the form online, etc. So it kind of consumed my time as well, and this is something which I kind of deeply regret to, and maybe mention as well how it can really take control of an individual. You know,
I mean, it sounds like it became an obsession.
It became an obsession of winning, and actually trying to win back what I had lost, but at the same time maybe just finding that win, you know. And when I used to lose, it would be the worst feeling ever, where I think nothing could possibly take that pain away. And then at the same time getting found out and people knowing about it made the pain even worse. So all I'm thinking about is to recreate that feel-good factor again and go back to the gambling. So it was very much like drugs and alcohol in that sense, and it kind of rewired my brain to kind of in a loop where I found it very difficult to stop. And despite being in that car crash type situation and basically on my knees, I still continued despite the negative consequences. You know, I lost a lot of respect within the school itself. The students did find out about my gambling, teachers did, some people used that information, you know, to create more harm, etc. So it actually didn't help me in any respect to kind of stop, you know. So it was a roller coaster of kind of emotion, because I started to lose hair as well. Once I went into the barber shop and saw a bald patch at the back, and I was really concerned, and he said, you must have eaten something. I said probably not, but I knew it was stress, definitely stress. And after I stopped gambling, within a year that hair it grew back, but I was very stressed because I was the head of curriculum in a school, and I was trying to balance that. It's like juggling so many plates, you know, and a family in the sense that honor within the family, trying to keep up appearances, and you know, trying to do so many things, and nobody could truly understand what I was feeling until they were in my shoes. Absolutely. And it's hard to stop, you know. Someone, why don't you just stop? You know, when I did get found out, you know, two individuals who sat with me said, well, I stopped. Why didn't you just stop? And I was thinking, only if it was that easy. It wasn't truly an addiction, which gripped me so ferociously that only dire consequences could actually had stopped, and I think there were many missed opportunities throughout the way, because I would like to call myself as somebody who's very understanding. I don't feel I'm self-righteous or believe myself to be true, but I would listen. However, it's really sad that there was no opportunity, even though 2 individuals did come to speak to me about it, or 3. The whole way it's orchestrated actually is counterproductive, where you become defensive. Nobody wants to admit that they got it wrong, and I had so much to unearth and excavate, that it was truly, I needed somebody with so much compassion and literally a truly non-judgmental attitude in order to do that.
It sounds like there wasn't a lot of empathy there for you. Like nobody was willing to say, like, look, I know it's hard. So let's talk about it at least. Like, I'm not telling you to give up overnight, but let's talk about it. Like,
that's it. I know. And the first thing which I feel, I could imagine myself being in a situation where somebody would say to, I know you've been through a lot. It must be really difficult for you, and, you've done really well for speaking to me, or even just still sitting here. So conversations like this, which would kind of, show that empathy, true empathy, because I didn't really gamble to make money. Although it may seem like that, it was truly an escapism, because initially when I did go into treatment, I thought it was a financial issue. Thereafter, I understood it to be escapism. Then I was actually running away from some sort of pain. The marriage was a total shambles, and it kind of, I was self-medicating, it could have been alcohol, it could have been drugs. For me, it could have been anything. So I think that's quite important to understand, because people, I've not been traumatized. Trauma doesn't have to be trauma, if you know what I mean. It could be just pain, something that was missing,
And like, when you said it, like you were looking for an escape, so yours just happened to be gambling, but also you already had a disposition to gambling. Like this family member, I'm sure if he drank or he did drugs, it would have been that. It just so happened that you were already vulnerable
I was already
to gambling.
vulnerable, definitely. And I don't want to attribute my addiction to my upbringing in terms of my parents, because they tried very hard, hard working. It's about replacing those things in the future, to lead a fulfilling life. That's what I feel. So it's not just about stopping is just a half of it. Somebody said a term recently called dry drunk. I'm a dry drunk, and I didn't understand what he meant, but he then explained that you could stop drinking, but the washing machine in your brain keeps going, where you don't change many aspects of your life. You're still gambling with your life, basically. So I made a conscious decision that I'll change, whatever, because part of the 12-step program it's a character defect. Eventually it erodes and decimates your character because of what I needed to do to fulfill my kind of gambling addiction. So lying, deception, deceiving, things which were abhorrent to me. I truly believe in the hadith which says on the day of judgment your good character will be weighed first. I am a believer of that, because I truly believe that one's character has to be true and profound, and it's a lifelong effort, and it's almost like this cognitive dissonance, which I was experiencing, where I didn't want to be that person, truly did not want to be that person, however felt compelled to, because of something which was internally missing. And when people attribute that to a lack of dini fervor or religiosity, then it hurts me, because I spent the best part of my youth engaged in that dini, and I did not engage blindly in that sense. I was committing a lot of time.
You went out looking for it.
Totally. So it kind of, I feel my struggle previously, actually now I look back at it positively, because I could not have been the person which I am today. I wouldn't have been sat here today talking about it, so it's a positive. I've got to take the positive.
Of course,
out of
everything happens for a reason. Just picking up on the last thing that you said, it was a bit before where you were saying
Yeah.
how when you were younger and you used to go out into the circles and you used to do the
Yeah,
Tabligh Jamaat
yeah,
and stuff like
yeah,
that. Obviously, when you have that certain position in a society, or
yeah,
you have like an authority, or you
yeah,
have like a status or
yeah,
an image,
yeah,
like you said,
yeah,
keeping up appearances, there's a sense of not saying you were, but
yeah,
for others, there's a sense of superiority, like
yeah,
sort of,
yeah,
I have to live
yeah,
up to this name,
yeah,
and therefore
yeah,
I
yeah,
can do this and
yeah,
X, Y,
yeah,
Z. But also, I've read
yeah,
and like personal experiences is that when people are gambling and they get that buzz, it's almost a feeling of invincibility.
yeah,
Invincibility, is that the right word?
yeah,
And
yeah,
where you feel like nothing can touch you, and
yeah,
you're like,
yeah,
you've got all the power that you can possibly
yeah,
have.
yeah.
Does that sound true to you? And do you think it's because you weren't getting that feeling of invincibility anywhere else?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel I did get the respect and the kind of respect that people seek within the community. So where I was teaching, I was well respected. I guess what I was missing was that a sense of belonging and love, you know, and I think that was it, you know, because I used to see, you know, it's like I remember Home Alone, and Kevin McAllister walking and his family's in New York, and he's watching all the houses through the window, watching them, you know, cut the turkey or Thanksgiving, I don't know what it was. I was like that person where I felt everybody has that perfect family, you know. Obviously I truly appreciate it now after, but I think that was it, you know, that comfort, something I was good at, because internally at home, you know, nowadays, you know, we very much encourage our children, celebrate their achievements, etc. However, I didn't truly feel that whatever I did kind of was acknowledged. Maybe it was acknowledged internally, most definitely it was, but externally, how did that manifest? You know, it did have a profound effect on me, and maybe I tried to seek that through my gambling, but there isn't one answer why I kind of turned to gambling. There were many things, you know. Boredom
factors.
is a part of it as well, you know. Definitely.
I just you mentioned like the feeling of belonging. Did you find a community or belongingness when you were gambling? Like, is that a thing?
Yeah, well, I did find, for example, when I do work, then I am quite passionate in that sense, where I go over and beyond. So I was going over and beyond in my gambling. So I had a sense of belonging there, that I need to do something. And within the betting shops, I did feel a sense of belonging, because people knew me there, although it wasn't the best company. So I mean, I guess
more fulfilling than what you had.
More fulfilling than what I had. And because with my true friends, which I call my true friends, you know, their company was fantastic, but they didn't know that side to me, and I wanted them to know, possibly because I have another family member who struggles with addiction as well, another addiction, which is quite serious. And where do you offload these feelings? You know, it's quite intense, you know. Absolutely. The emotions and I'm somebody who there was a lot of pent up frustration, anger towards that individual, and there was no healthy place to actually let it out. And gambling did certainly help me in that way, you know. It kind of soothed.
So it was a coping mechanism.
Yeah, it was 100% coping mechanism. And you know, that's what I teach today as well, that it is a coping mechanism. When you do truly peel the layers within yourself, you will find that you're coping from something. You know.
Absolutely. So when I was doing a bit of research for this podcast, I obviously came across all sorts of stuff online. Don't trust everything that you see on Google.
Of course.
But there was like this question answer kind of thing, and somebody sort of answered, somebody probably similar in your situation, saying, "Oh, I have this gambling addiction. I don't know how to stop. What would you advise?" And like whoever this person was, straight up just said, "You shouldn't worry, because the risk is from Allah." How would you argue that hadith? Because obviously it's true, we know risk is from Allah, but as you said, like the reason for your gambling wasn't purely for finances. So I mean, but if you were to tell yourself when you had originally got that insurance thing?
Yeah.
You know, what if someone said that to you then? How would you? Do you think anything would have gone differently? What would you have said? Reflecting back now, what do you think?
Well, reflecting back upon it, I should have sought some help from family member or somebody, you know, to say, I'm in this pickle. Please, are you able to help me out? Because I definitely 100% risk is from Allah, and I made a conscious decision to teach where I was teaching because of that. I felt what is important to me is lifelong learning, deen, this kind of propagating, practicing upon it myself. I wasn't really interested in making money, you know, or climbing up the career ladder. However, you know, when a person is in financial distress, and I mean that somebody is asking for money tomorrow or yesterday, then one has to be in a state of mind. And where's that sabr? Where does it come from? You know, you're turning from one individual to another. So definitely, but when you're in a crisis, I think you're thinking 100 miles per hour, and the decisions are not rational. You know, as with addiction, that cognitive prefrontal part of your brain kind of shuts down. You're in this flood of dopamine where you can't even think straight, and all you're thinking about is the now, you know, this moment in time, not the long-term consequence. So in terms of the risk, I was 100%. I was one of those individuals who kind of prioritized other things in my passion for teaching more than what accruing money or creating a kind of bulging bank balance or something like that. So it was not. I kind of continued to gamble as well. It was a hook to kind of recoup the losses, you know, to pay off my debts. So that was a motivation to keep going. You know, maybe you'll win. You know, I used to having those kind of dreams and thoughts that, okay, that was a near miss. You know, I nearly got it right. You know, I did pick the right horse, but he just got stuck in the race somewhere and didn't win. So it's called a gambler's fallacy. It's a fallacy, you know, and that kind of almost kept me, you know, on this conveyor belt, which I was unable to kind of jump off. You know,
it's almost better than facing reality.
It is. Yeah, definitely, because the reality is scary, it's daunting, it's actually frightening, to be honest. One of the proprietors of the school which I was working in said, this is disturbing. That's the words he used to describe my behavior and what was happening, you know. It was disturbing, and I just did not want to confront it. I was a coward at that time, and I think many individuals would feel like that. They would rather try and sort it out themselves. Definitely. You know, they would apply for loans, etc., or do something which will prevent shame falling upon themselves and the family as well. You know,
I mean, obviously we know that gambling addiction is predominantly male, like significant higher level of males is gambling. But this whole idea of men not seeking help or seeking support, does that play, like, do you think that's true for you? Did that play an effect in yourself? Like, was your gender a contributing factor towards you not seeking support or getting help?
It's a good question, to be honest. I think it wasn't more of a men issue. It was more of a cultural. There was some cultural barriers there, religious and cultural barriers, which prevented me. Not much of a kind of whether it's a man or a woman. Whether yes, in certain respects, yes. As a husband, I felt like the breadwinner, and I shouldn't really be opening up about my flaws, you know, in this respect. And my ex-wife continuously, for the latter part of our marriage, kept on reminding me that she was bailing me out, you know. So that made me feel even more rubbish to the fact that, okay, I can't really tell her the reality, you know. So it did play a part that, you know, though that hierarchy that we tend to uphold to, you know, did play a part somewhat. But truly it was cultural and religious boundaries which prevented myself from
So I'm really interested in hearing about, you know, how you mentioned that the proprietor at your school said that your behavior was disturbing. it might be a little bit insensitive, but I'm really interested to hear about how you were addicted to gambling and still teaching and running
Yeah.
your life. Like, what was it like? You know,
Yeah.
is it like how it is in the movies where you were turning up late to your classes, or you were gambling on your phone inside the lessons? Like, how did it work?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I was really I was a high functioning person with a gambling addiction, where I wasn't turning up late to work or anything like that, but I was towards the end, in between my lessons. I would be, because I had some time where I was on my own, and this is the biggest mistake, etc., that you could, one individual could. To give time and isolation to a gambler is the worst thing that could happen to that individual. So I was gambling in between lessons on my phone. However, when it wasn't an issue, it was always in the holidays, it was always on the weekend, it was always in the evening. It was never it only when I became very desperate that I actually used to do it in the school time, away from my classroom. And I was very ashamed of it, to be honest. Even if one person found out, I truly felt horrible about it. However, I needed to go in, I needed to teach. So towards the end, I couldn't even walk in the assembly hall because everybody knew. Well, not everybody, but quite a few older boys, they knew, and teachers knew. And you know, when people know and they look at you and you know that they know, but they don't say anything. That was the kind of feeling there. And it was horrible because I was in a position of authority, and I felt like a hypocrite as well. I did feel really bad. I wasn't teaching any Islamic subjects, I was teaching English, but the boys were very they were quite judgmental, in the sense that how could this individual be in this kind of place when he's doing this kind of thing. So and the actual management did try and speak to me, but it was almost like they were looking at the behavior as opposed to something deeper that help should be sought through.
So they were really offering solutions.
Yeah, the solutions were, maybe there's this support group out there, you know.
Take some time off.
Time off was never because we were kind of short staffed anyway. So time that was never offered. But it was very difficult to keep working in that sort of environment where you know, that sort of environment is actually what is wrong with society today in terms of our community, where no subject should be out of bounds. You know, in terms of discussion. I'm not criticizing the school here, it's just as a community. And pastorally, you know, we need to be much more effective. You know, young people today are dealing with a plethora of emotions and issues, and many young children which I know have actually, you know, gone through really troubling times, and due to my experience I was able to speak to them, you know, in that compassionate, non-judgmental way, the way I'd like to be spoken. I kind of spoke to them in that way, so that kind of heightened my anxiety being there in that respect. And in a very heated conversation with another staff member, I was told to sort myself out, you know, and I felt really
what benefit did that do?
It didn't really, because if I could sort myself out, I would have done it, you know. But I didn't even recognize it was an addiction. That's the frightening thing of it, that even despite the risks which I was taking, and I was taking when I wrote an article for the Asian Image, and the first thing the editor asked me was, how much did you lose? And I said, I lost more than money, you know. I lost relationships, I lost that reputation, you know. I was a person who'd like to keep low-key kind of person. Now I wasn't low-key. Everybody knew in the community that such and such a person's you know, he's doing this or he's engaged in this. And I led prayers, Taraweeh, in my local masjid. So there was a lot to lose more than money, you know. So there is this sense of almost like delusional thinking within the community that it's almost a choice. Okay, once upon a time it was a choice. When I first opened that account, I believe I made a conscious choice to open that account. Obviously there were factors, and like I said, it doesn't operate in a vacuum. but then it wasn't a choice. It's something that kept me going. I had to, it was a coping mechanism. I was self-medicating. So I think not many
It's
people
a
are.
compulsion by
Yeah,
the end of it,
exactly.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
And like being a teacher is really difficult. Like I have a couple of friends who
Yeah,
are teachers.
Yeah,
It's like 24/7. You guys get emails at all times of the night. I think I was listening on the radio, it was a couple of months ago, that I think teachers have the highest rates of alcoholism. Do you know what I mean? So, I mean, having a gambling addiction for a teacher actually isn't that completely out of order. And I think the experience that you had with your colleagues and the management at your school goes to show that actually what support is there for people in the workplace.
The management were very compassionate in the sense that they put up with me, and I'm grateful for that. I was a nightmare in terms of trying to manage, not because I was difficult in my behavior, but because of my gambling that was affecting the school's reputation. It could amongst students then talk to parents, so these things kind of escalate very quickly. So in that respect, however, individual conversations could have been better, definitely 100%. If I try and put myself in that their shoes, then I would definitely think about things differently. It was only after an APA, so a female teacher that worked in the same establishment but on the female section of the school, she found out and she knew what I was doing, etc., and abruptly one day called me and said, "You need help." That's all she said, "You need help." And that was a wake-up call. That was the seed that was planted, that actually there is such a thing as help out there.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because I was just gonna ask you, like, when did you finally realize like, okay, something's not right, like something needs to happen, like, or did you lose a big amount? Was it the phone call? Like, where did it all turn around for you?
It was a couple of things. So they say that a person with a gambling addiction, or probably any addiction, will go to three places. One is prison, the other is he'll become homeless, and the other is he'll have an early death. And I would have been in one of those places, I feel, because my thought pattern changed, where I was thinking, okay, I need access to money. What do I do now? Because I just couldn't, I guess I couldn't stop, or I needed to pay off debt, etc. So it was during that period where I kind of fell rock bottom, and people within the community, one or two individuals, came to see me and said, and I kind of admitted openly at that time, and that phone call kind of helped as well, because that was the pressure which I needed, because I was getting some sort of regular pressure from there to say, okay, you do need help, and then I kind of went for counselling and went to the GA kind of Gamblers Anonymous program. And the first time I spoke there, it was almost like a bird leaving a cage, all that frustration, all that pain, emotion which was pent up within me and I could be open in a room with people who have been there. And with the counsellor, the first interaction on the phone was very positive, and it was all to the extent like, that must have been hard, etc. So validating my feelings, not telling me stop feeling sorry for yourself, get up and get a job, or etc., or sort yourself out, or that kind of comments. But it changed my life, that counselling session, my first GA meeting, and I threw myself into it. I literally started to explore everything about addiction, which I wanted to know, Islamic perspective of addiction, started to speak to people about it, and I was still very ashamed. There's something called healthy shame, where it gives you those boundaries. However, another shame is where it stops you from leaving your house, getting out of bed, and that's the shame which I was experiencing. And it took me a very, very long time to kind of forgive myself. I couldn't forgive myself. I found it very difficult to actually even go to the local masjid, because seeing those faces, and it was very difficult, especially the shame aspect of it. But now I've kind of done a couple of talks in masjids about gaming and gambling addiction, and I think it's inspired people because they wouldn't have expected me to be in that situation.
Absolutely,
but I think there are so many people in that situation. It's just that some maybe recover and move on, and I'm worried about those people, because have they made that truly deep? Have they kind of done that soul searching, which I think is required, to find out why it happened in the first place, or maybe to make positive changes in their life so that they don't need that escapism or self-medication.
Sorry, I'm feeling really moved by your story, mashallah.
Yes.
So out of curiosity, and maybe for some of our listeners, I know obviously recovery is like lifelong, and it's never really like, okay, I'm recovering now, I'm never gonna whatever. But how long has it taken from you from that very first step that you said that, okay, I'm gonna get help, to where you are now?
It's approximately, I would say, about 12 to 18 months, I would say.
Really? Mashallah. I was expecting to say like 6-7 years.
No.
Mashallah.
And that's why I have slight trouble with the idea of that it's within you for a lifetime, only because I kind of feel healing is possible. That's something which I'm learning, or which I want to know more about, that in terms of our deen, in terms of our faith, there is a cure for everything. So in this respect, how does it kind of with addiction, and to understand how addiction is gripping as well, is that the alcohol was banned over many periods of years in Islam, and wasn't that a kind of a recognition of the addiction itself, and how it works, and the fact that you can be a good Muslim at the same time struggle with an addiction? That's something which I feel prevents people from, and what we do is we kind of push people on the cusp of society, and they stay on the fringes of society because they feel that we will never belong. And individuals who are in the masjids, maybe are they able to kind of forgive, and are they able to kind of accommodate individuals who are struggling? Now, with addiction itself and being a disease, initially when I went to Gamblers Anonymous, they were calling it a disease. I was like, disease? What do you mean disease? I wasn't really, I didn't kind of find myself in harmony with that term. So I said illness. I like illness. Maybe it is an illness. It is an illness, and if you treat it like an illness, maybe you'll take it seriously. Definitely. But then, since I stopped gambling, I've never looked back, and I feel there were other things in my life that I need to change. Communication, being open, being self-esteem is one, forgiving myself, recognizing what's good within us. There are many things that potentially that I needed to change in order to prevent a relapse. So that, an emotional relapse, a physical, whatever kind of relapse there is, overworking is one which I'm currently working on, So the idea that it lives on, because there is that stigma with it as well. It can be, imagine telling somebody that you've had an addiction and them thinking, oh gosh, I'm not living with him. What if you have? There are so many kind of binding issues there, and stigma, that I kind of don't like to call myself an addict, because I see it as a very negative connotations around it, because of what future implications implications it could have for an
Yeah.
individual, even though they may have. I have met individuals who have gone off heroin, you know, and when you see them, you will never know
You
that they were,
wouldn't be able to
and
tell,
they've made a
yeah.
complete, and maybe they've made those positive changes. So I think a lot of research needs to be done in this,
Absolutely,
especially from an Islamic perspective, because I feel, you know, the deen which I learnt in madrasa and which I learnt in my missionary work is completely different to the deen which I learnt when I lost that, when I kind of gave up gambling.
Yeah.
I found a more loving deen, you know. And
do you feel like it replaced that what gambling fulfilled?
oh yeah, totally. I saw ayats of Quran, the hadith, and things which are, it's again, which I mentioned to you previously, that Inspirited Minds kind of talks to the Muslim youth or community today in a language which they can understand. You know, the Quran is it's a book for every era.
Yeah.
You know, so we need to speak the language of that era, and I think that's quite important.
Yeah,
you know,
mashallah. It's really, really inspiring, actually, and I really like how you brought in the fact that alcohol was made forbidden over a period of time. And I think what's, like, everyone always says that, you know, the reason that it was sort of forbidden is because when the Sahaba came to do the Salah, they said something wrong, right? And everyone kind of ignores the fact that they still came to Salah even though they were drunk. Do you know what I mean? So it's almost a bit like, so why wouldn't a gambler or somebody who has a gambling addiction still turn to Allah, still turn to Salah? And I think that completely defeats the stereotype where, like, or if you have an addiction or you have mental illnesses because you don't have Iman, whereas we know these Sahaba who were drunk and still knew their obligatory prayers, and they still tried to do it on time. So I think that definitely reflects, like, the character that you had, and how many other people who have or have had addictions, and how that, like, actually remembering Allah even in those times where you might be doing something haram can actually be very gripping and can actually keep you somewhat grounded. I'm really interested to know, because I mean, my fault, but I haven't really sort of researched how GA works, or like what the, I mean, is it similar to AA? Like,
very similar.
How does it work? And did they accommodate Islam, or was it, you know, did you have to do that yourself?
Well, the thing with GA, it operates very similar to the 12-step program in Alcoholics Anonymous. Very similar. People sit around in a circle and introduce themselves as a compulsive gambler, which I kind of found it difficult to do. And we read from a book, and every Friday we would kind of read and a paragraph for each, and it's all kind of positive messages and almost accepting that it has got us beat. You know, the addiction has, the gambling addiction has beat the individual, and then kind of the program professes to develop a change within the individual through forgiveness, through making up with individuals that they have wronged. So it's an opportunity to offload, you know, whatever that person has happened to him during the week, and then it's an opportunity for fellow individuals to respond to that person. So many times they'll praise them for the positive steps that they've taken. Some individuals will have a sponsor who they can ring at any time, and I think that's quite important, you know, when you're in those moments where you really need to speak, because when I gave up, there was 1 month, the first 3 months I found very difficult. Actually felt suicidal in those moments, the first 3 months, and I rang somebody, and it helped me. You know, by the end of that call, I felt better. And this one kind of line, I always remember, that this time shall pass. You know, if it wasn't for that, you know, I don't know what would have happened, but GA was very strong in that sense. You know, it's very loving. You know, people really truly respect each other on a human level, and something which I've not found in my community. I found it really sad. It's really saddening, to be honest, that humanity does not exist. It may exist, and there are really beautiful individuals in the community, but they're just buried away. You know, buried away. And recently,
because they don't keep up with the appearances.
Exactly. And do they want to associate themselves with a gambler or with a alcoholic alcoholic or whoever, you know. And one individual which I met recently who was struggling with alcohol addiction, similar, you know, very religious, praises Salah as well. He mentioned to me that whilst drinking, you know, bottle to his mouth, he would praise Allah, and he would say, oh Allah, please stop this, you know, I want to stop. So I could feel the pain, you know. And I think the difference is that people in GA kind of see that child, in that soul suffering, you know, and that's what I kind of experienced. I think that was for people, it's changed their lives, you know. I don't go anymore, I infrequently go. However, there was a Muslim brother that came there as well. The first time I went there, I was terrified, you know. I went dressed like this, you know, and people were just like,
what is this guy doing?
Yeah, what is it? Are you here to ask for direction somewhere? You know. And it was really difficult, and I put myself out there. And even to this day, I did a talk recently in Manchester to public health professionals about gambling, and I was the only Muslim there, and I stood up and told my story. I think, you know, it's difficult, but I think it's quite important to say that it does affect our community, our individuals.
And
so
also I think it's really important because especially for people who aren't Muslims and they see us as Muslims, they kind of think that the only issues that we have is extremism and oppression. It's like, actually, we have exactly the same problems as you, and if not, it's even worse for us because we don't have the support services that are open and accommodating for you guys, as, you know. So
definitely. And the only thing which was lacking for me, I felt, was a safe space. That's the GA is a safe space, counseling is a safe space. And because they see you as a human being who's suffering, and they regularly used to tell me that we don't care where you come from, but this addiction could affect anybody. Absolutely. And there was one Muslim brother that used to come, and I had one conversation with him, and then I invited his wife to also come to that conversation, and that was the first. They both broke down in that, and that proved that communication, that safe space where you can talk about everything, you know. And now to this day, he's gambling free, and I ring him maybe twice a week or once a week, you know, just to have a normal conversation. And that's all you need at times, you know, how to kind of you know, cope with life at that time, you know. So I feel the 12-step program, when I first saw it, I literally had tears in my eyes, because that's my deen, you know. I couldn't really find it elsewhere, but here it is, you know. Just for today, you know, I will do something good. If somebody sees me, I will do it again. And, you know, things like that. Just for today, I will be happy. Just for today, I will act courteously. You know, I will dress smartly. Things like that, you know, which are beautiful in that sense.
It's great that you found it, but also there's a part of me that's like, why don't we have that in our own spaces, in our own communities? Why isn't that readily available for people as and when? Because all these gems that are so easy, and you know, I was speaking with a friend not so long ago that Allah has made it so easy for us to worship Him and to be in, you know, to have our good deeds recorded and to be in His good books. But they're so buried under jargon and fiqh and this creed and that creed. And although that's important, I'm not, you know, watering down that. But also it's quite difficult for normal Muslims like you and I to find out how to just be good Muslims and live our lives.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just about, again, just to reiterate, it's about speaking the language. It's about just making it accessible. You know, some things which aren't accessible, and you actually are prevented to seek them because you're not qualified, or maybe you need to be in the company of a scholar to do such things. But it's having those open spaces and opportunities, you know, to explore your faith, explore your deen, and not be kind of criticized for it, you know. And I feel there is a lot of work required, especially in the addiction, because families do suffer. And I've not talked about families, you know, where living with an addict, a person with an addiction, is tumultuous, to say the least, you know, the emotions. In fact, the family members then tend to absorb a lot of the addictive behavior of the individual, and that's quite distressing. And I think these family members need to be liberated from that as well, that pain, etc. So that support is definitely not there. And what I'm trying to do is kind of bridge individuals and families to mainstream services, because it's something you can get the best of both worlds in that respect. Having a faith-based kind of support service is kind of essential, because many individuals want to reconcile, want their deen, they feel very passionately and strongly about it. However, just going to a GA program, seeing generally white faces there, they feel almost reticent to kind of engage in that, because there's a sense of disbelief and okay, how's this relevant to me? I'm a Muslim, etc. So I think it's something which is highly needed in that.
So one of the questions I actually wanted to ask you, which you already almost answered, was what is missing from these Muslim circles and these Muslim institutes? So we mentioned safe space, we've mentioned resources and easily accessible things. What else do you feel like we could have, or what else do you feel like we need, or how do we engage with people like yourself, or what do we need to provide a space for people like yourself who are practicing and whatever, what have you, and also have these? Because I think one of the things I was thinking before that I forgot to mention was when you said that a lot of people were judgmental towards you. I think a lot of people forget that we all have our skeletons in the closet. So for you, it might be gambling addiction. For someone else, it's pornography. For somebody else, it might be social media. For another person, it could be that they excessively overeat, or they gossip, or they backbite. And I think one of the most amazing things I take from our deen is that the Prophet ﷺ, he treated everybody the same. Like even his enemies, he was compassionate towards them, and he was really optimistic. You know, like what happened in Ta'if, right? Allah gave him the opportunity to ruin these people, and he said no, because there's a chance that the people of this land can go on to become believers and worship you. And that's something that always sticks with me, because I always think like this person could actually be better than me, or they could turn out to be a lot better than me in the future. So I mean, I definitely feel like there needs to be a space for like completely non-judgmental circles. Or definitely,
because I think what I saw was that a lack of compassion. It's a really suffocating space to be in, really suffocating, where there's no margin for error. There's no, especially within those circles where I kind of came from. And the idea that it's almost like people are almost compelled to almost continue this Jekyll and Hyde kind of personality, repressing that true self and seeking that right support. So what I kind of advocate for is individuals they tend to call them experts by experience. Not that I'm proud of it, but because we have lived through that pain, and giving them that opportunity, a platform to actually speak and inspire individuals. Or I think nowadays what's happening, especially in the gambling kind of treatment network, is that they're using people with lived experience to actually facilitate treatment, or not facilitate treatment, but better treatment, improved. So they're actually being informed by people who have gone through the system or been through the trauma of kind of addiction. Within our community, people, do they get an opportunity? How many people do I remember who have kind of left drugs and alcohol ever speak? It's very rare. Definitely. It's always the alim that speaks, isn't it? And they don't tend to understand true reality, Quran and Hadith, totally. However, I feel I want to listen to somebody who's been there. Then I want to feel their pain, you know. And why did I not turn to drugs and alcohol? Because I actually saw that, the pain. So I think that's what's needed. We have to celebrate people who have been through that journey and come out of it, as well. So that's something which I think needs to be done.
And I think, as you were saying, like it's always an alim or the imam speaking, which is great. They're well learned and well versed. But however, they also have to acknowledge that actually they're not well learned and well versed and things like this. And even when I'm at my local masjid and I listen to the khutbahs, and they say like the dangers of this is this and this, and the punishment of this is X, Y, Z. And it's a bit like, okay, this is just going in through one ear and out the other ear. And especially when I look around all the other young people at the Jummah, and I'm just like, they're not taking any of this in. It isn't relatable at all to them. And like you said, it's not in a way that it's not expressed in a way that they understand, and nowadays it's not related to anything that they have.
Definitely.
So I'm really interested in how culture affected all of this, because really brave, mashallah, because I imagine where you live is quite a tight-knit small community, and obviously Asian communities, everyone's in each other's pockets, unfortunately. But how was it for you, and like how was it for you when people started finding out about your gambling addiction, like in terms of the culture, and what is it like now? Are you still known as Suhayl the gambler? That sounds like a superhero.
It was indeed one of the biggest challenges of it, to be honest, and cultural harm is quite significant, and it was very significant for me because it actually prevented me from being who I was. So I hid myself in isolation. I didn't really converse. I cut off my friends because I was so ashamed of what I did. And in terms of a community, what happened was that certain individuals would see me going to a betting shop, maybe, even though I thought I tried hard not to be spotted. But instead of talking to me, they would go to my family members and maybe talk to my dad. And my dad, being my dad, it comes out all wrong at times. And then that creates a relationship breakdown, And a friend did find out, and an imam found out, and the imam told another person, who then told another person to speak to me, and he came to my house and said, okay, you're right. He just turned up, and I said, yeah, do you want to sit in the car? Okay, let's sit in the car. So then small talk, I was thinking, okay, come out with it, I know something is gonna come. So he came out with it, and I denied it because there was a performance there which wasn't really neat. It wasn't genuine. And that's culture for you, where you're hearing it from the community, and it's making you feel even worse than you already feel. I know I had the biggest problem in the sense that I know I was doing wrong. I used to avoid listening to lectures about gambling. In the newspaper, if it was there, in the Asian Image, I was to shut it away. I was so ashamed that I didn't want to read about it because I knew it was wrong, and that was suffocating. That was difficult for me to kind of consume. And in the school itself, the culture, it was more than culture, where people didn't really want to associate with me. So students who were very fond of me were now not very fond.
Is this like a general secular school, or is this an Islamic school?
It's Islamic school, so very orthodox, very orthodox. And it's just about people. In culture, as we know, we brush things under the carpet. The elephant in the room stayed in the room. We never spoke about it, and that's culture. And that's I wish, I wish somebody would have talked about it in that. Now my friend Ibrahim is here today, and he was one of the first individuals that I spoke to about it, and he didn't bat an eyelid, and maybe because of his upbringing was very different to how it is, and that then first time I spoke to him again about it, and he saw my journey, through it, and that was a safe space for me. So within the family, my family wouldn't talk about it to me, they wouldn't openly. I think they never actually advocated for me to go into any kind of support and anything like that. So there was a barrier there, which prevented me from kind of opening up, truly to kind of say, okay, I've kind of messed up here, So these are the barriers, really, and it became very difficult to be honest and open about it.
And what is it like now? Because I assume you're still living in the same place.
Yeah, I'm still living in the same community.
What is it like? Are you able to get to the masjid okay and stuff?
I tend to go to a different masjid just purely because I feel, I just feel that it's best if I just go elsewhere. However, I am fine now. I've slowly managed to reconnect and speak in the masjid. So recently I did a talk in a local community masjid where 120 people came,
Mashallah.
and some knew me from a young age. So that I guess that was a step that in the right direction. And people, what I've noticed is they have more respect for you after that. They truly do. It's just a matter of just being honest and open about it, from my perspective, yeah, definitely. So it has become easier, definitely become easier, and I feel away from where I was, that environment has been much better. So I work in a completely different environment. I work out of town, which is better for me. So I've made some decision which I feel are helping in my recovery, you could say, and I've met individuals who who are Muslims, and they're truly very compassionate and didn't really judge me at all. And I feel we need more of those individuals.
I just have a quick question. I know earlier you said you don't like to refer to yourself as an ex-addict. So what, like, do we need to refer to you as anything, or do you say I had a gambling addiction?
It's a difficult. I don't have the right answer, and I guess I will learn. And I feel I do believe recovery is not a linear process. It's up and down. I acknowledge that, and I know there will be occasion, there will be triggers, etc. And it's how you manage those triggers. So I refer to myself as somebody who had a gambling addiction. So that's what I do, and I think that sits with me okay now. And in GA, if I do go to GA, then obviously I just go with the flow. But deep down, I feel in my recovery I'm somewhere else in the sense. So I would say I may be in recovery because there are certain things which I would like to do in terms of I've not truly as if I go to my local masjid, that's when I say, okay, it doesn't affect you anymore. What people say about you doesn't really affect you, because it would affect me even now. If I heard somebody talking negatively, then initially it would affect me. However, then having thought about it, that's what they think. Alhamdulillah, you have made this progress.
So I just have a couple more questions, inshallah. I think it would be really great if we knew what was the most profound thing that you have discovered, whether that's about Islam, about you, about gambling, in your recovery. Because I know you've done a lot of soul searching, and you've said some really incredible things. So what would you say has been the most significant or the most profound?
The most profound thing which I take from my recovery is that not to judge, so to have compassion for the person with the addiction, because once upon a time I didn't. Person with a gambling addiction, or I have managed to I can identify with them, and I know there's a soul in there which is suffering. Deep down they need help, they are crying for help. And and I would work with anybody. I would work with anybody now. And I would even if they said they robbed a bank, I would not bat an eyelid. I can't, and I'm in that position, I feel, where I'm really grateful for that, what Allah has blessed me with, that kind of thought or that compassion.
It's liberating.
It's liberating. And the other thing would be that He has shown me dimensions of our deen which I thought didn't exist. And some of those are to do with the soul, to do how kind of delicate and fragile it is, and how important,
how far it can be stretched as well,
exactly,
and still be in existence.
And another thing, that's how suffering can be something positive, where if you didn't suffer, then a lot of wisdom wouldn't be kind of attributed to Allah. Wouldn't bless you with that wisdom unless something profound has. And I feel when I talk sometimes, some people are kind of affected by it, because it's something which I truly kind of lived. And those are a couple of things which I have taken from my kind of my experience, in that sense.
What advice would you give to somebody who might be in a less severe or more severe position than what you once were, or anybody who's suffering from a gambling addiction? What would you say?
The first thing which I would say is that stopping is just a half of it. And if somebody's at the very early stages where the neural pathways haven't kind of completely set in that sense, then I would say that some early addiction is something which will manifest in in ways which will be disturbing, and they will take over your life, and before you know it, it won't leave you until it's taken every single thing from you. Somebody told me a very short incident where a person in recovery, the partner of that person said, well, you've got me now, so you don't need to go to your groups. And then she mentioned that, well, I didn't even spare my children for my alcohol. What makes you think I'll stop it for you? So that's my kind of advice to individuals, that it will consume your whole life, and you will lose every single thing, even if you feel that it's dear to you, And the other thing is to kind of to kind of open yourself up to treatment, and not think that Allah alone is the healer. Allah is the healer. Allah gives healing. However, we live in terms of our sustenance, we're very happy to go out and work, 9 to 5. But for our treatment, we're not willing to go to a CBT or to counseling. Counseling has got so much taboo around it, but I feel most people need counseling because we struggle with daily life, or it would help us in leaps and bounds. It's not a negative at all. It's something that just allows us to process our thoughts and to develop positive thinking patterns. So to open yourself to treatment, because that's what I did. I was ready to do anything. I was ready to go GA, and however many I used to go GA, and it was really cold at night, and I used to get home at 11 o'clock at night, having walked half an hour to go to GA and go home, because I was committed. I was committed that I really needed to do this, and so that's what I would say, that don't worry about your dress or how you look, etc. These treatments are quite effective, and they will actually save you from a lot of heartache in the long term.
Great.
Definitely, because I kind of went round in the spirituality circles. So I went from dhikr to tabligh jamaat to this to that. I was searching for that. Some people might find it, but generally speaking, marry that with traditional Western therapy, or
it's very holistic.
Holistic, it's got to be. They call it psychosocial, spiritual, model.
Fantastic. Okay, just to finish off with, what is the most, what keeps you strong? What's the most significant reminder that you tell yourself that keeps you going?
The greatest kind of motivation is that I can't let this experience kind of define me. So I truly want to be successful in dunya and akhirah. And I feel Allah is merciful. So Allah is merciful, and He has apportioned mercy for me, and I feel He must have put me through this for a reason, and inshallah I trust His plan. Like Rumi said, that what does the ant know about the pattern upon which it walks upon? So it's a beautiful pattern. It might be a Turkish rug or something. For me, this is Allah's got a plan. I trust His plan, and I want to be successful. So I guess that's my motivation, and that's my inspiration. Not every day will be positive. Some days I may wake up feeling really, thinking about it. But that's definitely, as long as it changes. And the other motivation is that I really want to help people, individuals, before they lose everything, because the more it's in isolation, the more destructive it is. In the Asian community, the social capital, so the amount of money spent on gambling, it's massive, it's huge. Really? There are individuals who have spent £75,000 in 1 hour, and that can only be because they just feel they can't go anywhere and they need to do something, etc. So that's my motivation as well, that the suffering is really immense. I think a lot of families are really, really good at hiding it, and it kind of develops other physiological issues as well as depression, etc., which could mask the true issue that individuals. So it's a social blight, to be honest, and that's my motivation. That even I don't want to be doing this work for as a day job, etc., but however, if it helps individuals,
passion. Yeah.
definitely it's and maybe it's Allah's plan that there will be individuals like this out there, who might, even if it's one person listening to this podcast who kind of is affected by it and seeks some support, inshallah.
I'm sure there is.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's anything that we've missed out, or anything you'd like to mention, anything you want to talk about?
And I think we've covered quite.
We have. Mashallah, my brain is like spilling over right now.
Yeah. Mashallah, it's been Jazakallah khairah for the opportunity, and I hope the kind of listeners do benefit from it as well. And there's always hope. Like I mentioned, this time shall pass. So whoever's suffering, that suffering is only temporary. And definitely. Alhamdulillah for the opportunity.
Yeah. Where can our listeners find you, or if they have any questions, where? Yeah. Because there might be some people that want to ask something specifically to you. Are you okay with them emailing you?
Yes, of course. I do work kind of on a freelance for Beacon Counselling Trust. In Liverpool. So they might want to get in touch with me through there, or contact maybe Inspirited Minds to
inshallah we'll have everything written on the webpage, inshallah. Okay. Well, may Allah preserve you and keep you steadfast. And honestly, I don't even have an addiction, and I feel like I'm not gonna have an addiction ever. No, you can really tell like the pain and the anguish that your afflictions have, that you've experienced. Because honestly, like the wisdom, mashallah, and the gems that you've shared, and I think the way that you've described it has been really, really moving, mashallah. So jazakumullah khairan for being here. Like honestly, from the bottom of, and on behalf of Inspirited Minds as well, really appreciate you coming all this way and being here. And I'm sure our listeners are just as grateful. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khairan.
So that was the end of the podcast. It was so amazing. My brain is still spinning over at the amount of stuff that we spoke about, and I hope that you guys found it just as beneficial. It was such a pleasure to host Suhayl, and big thanks to him and his friend Ibrahim for coming down, and also it was a pleasure to host you guys. We really want to know how we did and what you guys thought of it. Please leave us a review. Please subscribe we're on all major platforms, and please leave us a good review, inshallah. Jazakallah khair for listening. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.